Hi there, Ben Futrell here. I'm just going to take you through using Photomatix to process a HDR image. So I've taken an image this morning at a place called Longreef, and was at a beautiful spot. Actually, in fact, the weather wasn't great this morning, and I didn't think I was going to get very nice colours out of the sunrise, and then all of a sudden the sun poked through the clouds and made for a really good exposure, so a good image. So being into the sun, I took 7 images, and I take 7 when I'm shooting into the sun because it gives me that increased dynamic range. When I'm not taking a HDR image into the sun, so just away from the sun, I only use 5 exposures, but 7 when I'm into the sun. So I'm just going to browse for those. I keep all my images that I'm processing in a folder called Processing. And this one's just called Longreef, and you'll see there they are. So there's 7 of them. So Longreef 1 through to 7. So I'm just holding down the shift key to select them all, and I'm just going to say load. So you can see there's all 7 images there. So just say OK, and that brings up the pre-processing options. So in this particular program with these choices, or in this particular case, I won't tick any of these boxes. And I rarely tick any of these boxes, but let's just go through them quickly so you understand what they are. Align image or source images is exactly as it says. If I was taking a photo handheld, for example, there's no way I'm going to take the images, all 7 exposures, in exactly the same position. So I would need to select the align source images. Or just say I was on a boat, for example, and I was taking some images from a boat, and the boat's going to be moving slightly, then I might tick that. But otherwise I don't tick that. I leave that unticked. Removing ghosts. You would do this if you had something in your image that was moving, like a bird might be flying through, a person might be walking, a wave might be crashing. There's a lot of different things. A branch might be moving in the wind. Because there's several exposures you're merging together, you're going to get this ghosting, which is quite unattractive. So you would remove ghosts. And if I do use Photomatix to remove ghosts, then I use this selective deghosting tool, which allows you then to draw with your mouse an area that you want the ghost removed from. But quite easy to remove in Photoshop later, so I tend not to use that tool. Reduce noise on all source images. So you can select underexpose if you want, because quite often a darker image might have a bit of noise. I tend just to keep it on all source images if I need to reduce noise. In this case, it's not a scenario where I have a lot of noise, so I won't select it. HDR does increase noise, or does create noise anyway, but I know that later on in Photoshop I can quite easily get rid of it, or I can even use something after Photoshop if I want to, or as a plug into Photoshop. So I once again very rarely tick that. And then reducing chromatic aberrations. Sounds like a good name for a band, doesn't it? Chromatic aberrations. But if you're not sure what chromatic aberrations are, then check it out on YouTube, or Google it and get an understanding of what it is. But essentially it's like cyan or magenta type fringing around edges of high contrast. So for example, I'll use this image actually on my desktop as an example. See this timber post here. It's got sharp edges and areas of high contrast compared to the background, and especially if the sun was behind it, it would definitely get chromatic aberrations. Now it looks like it's even got a little bit here that I haven't got rid of, because the HDR process actually creates it. In fact, I'm sure it has. You can see that line down the side there. I don't know if you can, your video is probably not as big as my screen, but there's a little bit there. So that's what chromatic aberrations are. So once again, it is quite easy to remove in Photoshop. You can select the color you want to remove and then just desaturate, or you can use this tool here, but it is quite easy. So in this case, I'm actually not going to tick any of them, and I'm just going to hit pre-process. Might take a little bit of time. It's 7 images out of the D800, and of course they're all large files, 36 megapixel sensor in the D800, and I shoot RAW. Yet when I export from Aperture into my processing folder, you would have noticed they were all JPEGs. So I create JPEGs. I find that works better for Photomatix rather than just importing RAWs. Photomatix has to turn them all into JPEGs anyway. Now you can see that this has just opened up in one of these other selections that I've played with before. This is the black and white one down here. This box of goodies down the bottom here are just like some presets. What I do is I just shut it, just like so, get it out of the way. We've got a histogram here, which is quite important. We're going to use that as we process this image. And then over here on the left hand side, which I'll just bring over here, is all our tools for adjusting the image. So I tend just to put that over the left there. I put the histogram up to the right so I can keep an eye on what's going on with it. And then I hit the default button to start from scratch. Okay, now you can see by looking at this in its default state that it's lacking contrast and depth. Overall, it looks fairly well balanced. We've lost a little bit of detail in the sun, but that's okay. That's probably what the human eye would see. But I want to deepen the image. I want more clarity and depth. So I always bring the strength up to 100, which tends to do that. You can see straight away that's given me a little bit more of an edge. The other thing I like to do then is increase the detail contrast, just to once again give me a bit more depth. Just being careful though, because what HDR tends to do is it will destroy things like the sky, and can create haloing. And I mean, you can see here the sky is very dirty. The blue parts are like black, like someone's rubbed their hands on it once they've been covered in charcoal. And the clouds are quite yucky. They look quite stormy. They're not like that. They were quite nice and light and fluffy. So I'll fix that in Photoshop a bit later. What I tend to do with Photomatix is I go, okay, what are the parts of the image that I really want to make sure I get looking good? And that to me would be the sun here. I really like the sun. I want to make sure that looks good. The foreground rocks here, I want to make sure that there's lots of depth in those, so you can always feel like you're standing there and you can feel the uneven surface beneath your feet. And then this timber walkway up here, this is just, it's almost like two paths, the path to the bright light or the path up here out of the, sort of, that's the composition that I've got here, sort of gives you that. It's almost like two images in one. You could draw a line down the middle here, and it's quite a fun composition. Alright, so strength I've put on 100. The next thing I like to do is bring the black point up, and you'll see what's happening if you watch the histogram here. I'm actually, that moved it, so if I don't know why it's on 0. 0 is quite yucky, but you'll see it'll move that histogram to the left because I'm increasing the number of the blacks in the picture, and that just gives it depth. It makes it more three-dimensional, so you can start to feel that 3 dimensions already. Now if I increase that white point, there's a bit of a hazard, and that is that the whites around the sun here, I'm losing the sun really badly, and I've seen that before in HDR, and you can see the clouds look horrible. Let's forget the clouds for this tutorial, because I'm going to just have to fix those in when I get into Photoshop later. But let's have a look at the sun. The sun's one of the important things in my picture that I want to make sure looks good. So we know white point's blowing it out, but I really want to bring up the light in the image, because that's just too dark now. So we've got this little one here, gamma. So I'll use the gamma. What I find the gamma does though is it reduces contrast, so then I have to bring the black point up. So it's really a balancing act, like really is a balancing act. So that's looking quite good. Now if I bring the gamma all the way up there, you'll see what happens. Like just there goes my contrast. It's almost non-existent. So what I want to do is just get it at a point where I'm sort of happy with it. That sort of looks to me like what I saw this morning when I stood there. It's not, you don't want these overly bright, or, I might just bring that color saturation just a little bit. Once again, I can fix that later. I can really, I can muck around with things like saturation later. But that's, it's nice and warm. I'm just gonna, and you can really, you can throw these around as much as you want, just play it. Every single image is different, I find. Luminosity, too far to the right makes it look like a painting. So just be careful with luminosity. I tend to leave it sort of in the middle, depending on what I'm trying to achieve, So I'm just going to bring that black point up a little bit, just really deepen that image. So really, that's really feeling like I was standing there. It's really starting to get there. I just increase that white point just a tad, just a little bit at a time. Once again, see that sun. I can see the detail right of that cloud right into the iris of the sun there. So that's really good. Detail contrast, let's just bring that up a tad more. Okay, and what that's doing, in fact, I'll swing it all the way to the right so you can see what it's doing. So it's really increasing the contrast. If I go all the way to the left, you'll see that we lose the contrast there. And it's in the detail that's really increasing the detail contrast. So the real fine details. You know, that's looking pretty good. That is looking pretty good. I might just raise that up a little bit more, that white point, just to brighten that foreground just a tad. See, that's damaged my sun too much, so I'm just dropping it back a bit. So we'll have to try the gamma. Just that little bit, looking good, looking good. All right, and now the black up just that tad more, just to keep the depth in. I mean, the black, you can stick the black point. Sometimes I put it all the way on the right hand side, but you can see what it's doing to the sky, which is quite yuck. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to drop that back there. All right, that's looking pretty darn good. All right, I think I'm good. I don't think I'm going to do anything else. Lighting adjustments, by the way, sort of throws the light around from, you know, you can see there that really pushes onto the foreground. That makes it, and then or up there in the sky. So I might just actually bring that a bit to the left. Just got to be careful with it because it does, you know, this I find the lighting adjustments is where you'll start to get haloing, and haloing is not good at all. And once I want this, you know, I want this path here to be brightened up a little bit. You know, you can. It's obvious the sun's coming from there. It's hitting this grass, and you know that is shielded from the sun. But the sun, you know, the sun is hitting here, and you can quite clearly see that. So you want all of that detail. That looks quite good. I'm just going to drop that gamma back a bit, see if I can get some contrast back in this. There we go. All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. Once you're happy with it, sort of just a matter of hitting the process button and letting it do the work. And so we'll do that now. Just hit process. You can see it's tone mapping. It will create its own file name. As you can see at the top there, long reef 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's the tone mapped image. Look, and it's quite soft. We'll sharpen that all up in Photoshop because that is very, very soft. We don't want it to be that soft, but that's for another video. So there you go. I just hit Command W, which is just, you know, to close the window, and then asks me, do I want to save it? I can just say, yep, save it, and I just leave it at the name that it gives it. Say save. That's it. Nice and simple. So there you go. That's how to use Photomatix Pro. That one was 7 exposures. It's exactly the same with 5 exposures. Same with 3 exposures. You know, you could load just for 3 of those exposures in. You don't probably need to load them all in. I just load them all in. If your computer's a bit slow, load a few less in. It'll probably make things go a little bit faster. So there you go, using Photomatix Pro.